This is Breaking Down Security, episode 4 for January 24th, 2015. Welcome back. You're listening to Breaking Down Security at the Breaking Down Security World Headquarters in, I don't know, Seattle, and with our small branch office in Austin, Texas.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Make sure our new satellite office is coming along quite well.
We're growing fast.
That's right. We are growing fast. So, Mr. Boettcher, what are we doing this week?
This week we're going to talk about the SANS top 20 security controls. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. But we're only going to do a few today because it'd be like a 16-hour podcast if we talked in depth about all of them, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, each one of these security controls could probably be their own podcast by themselves. And I know that we, for a fact, have done podcasts on some of these controls in the past, and we're gonna kind of touch on those as we go along and mention the podcasts so that if you want to, you can go back down memory lane and check those out.
If we remember to mention them.
Yeah, I will definitely try to do that. So,
all right. So, even if you know about these and have been over them in the past, I know I found out about them a couple of years ago, went over them at the time, and I thought they were really awesome. This series of casts might be a nice review for you, and it may spark some ideas to use in your own place of business.
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the things is the SANS top 20 security controls really didn't come from SANS, which I actually thought they were because, I get it in the mail from SANS about the mailings and stuff. And one of them was like, ooh, the SANS top 20 security controls. Well, it's actually not theirs. They're actually, there's a group called the Council on Cybersecurity that involves SANS and other organizations like Qualys.
Wait a minute. I thought it was SANS at first, and then this new national organization SANS allowed them to take it over, something like that. Because they started in 2013.
Who did, SANS?
No. No, the Cybersecurity Council.
Well, okay. Maybe SANS decided that they needed to add on all these other people. So they did have the security controls, and then added these other companies and organizations who wanted to get involved.
They just made it bigger, more worldwide,
more inclusive.
Kind of let this other group take it over. Yeah, that's
more
what I think.
membershipy and cabalic. Is cabalic even a word? More like a cabal.
Maybe in some other language.
Maybe, yeah. So you've got organizations like Tripwire, Qualys. There are other annual members like I don't know. They've got HP's one of the members, Cyberpoint. And then you've got nonprofits like OWASP and EnergySec who probably put a little chop in on the security controls.
So they're all contributors, right?
Yeah, they're contributors, and they I hope it's not a pay-to-play kind of thing because that would just kind of run it.
No, I don't think it is. I think I read that as I was looking over them.
Okay. So, they the security controls got updated. Version 5.1 apparently came out October 7th of last year, 2014. That's version 5.1. Even though version 5 is on SANS site, you've got to go to this cybersecurity website to find the full version or the latest version.
All right, so how are we going to do this?
Well, I don't know. One of the things they break down one of the first things they talk about is like the quick 5 wins. The first 5 quick wins, which are 5 things that you can do to drastically change your security posture almost overnight.
Almost overnight. Okay.
Almost overnight, in many cases. And the only thing I could think of why they would have these is because these are the 5 most important things that they found after, seeing breaches or something, lessons learned that could have occurred. Like number 5 of the quick wins is reducing the number of admin privileges.
Reducing the number of users with admin privs. Okay, I can see how that's a quick win. You can run through all your accounts and look at for those who have administrative privileges and eliminate them, right? Or reduce them greatly. I see number 4 is patch system software. Yeah, so run over your Windows patching and whatever operating system patching you have. Make sure you're up to date.
Numbers 3 and 4 are patching within 48 hours, which
Okay.
I guess that's a big deal because a lot of people, especially now, they had those issues with Windows patches over the past few months. They don't patch fast enough.
I guess you'd use your best judgment on what to patch. Just apply some logic to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
And number 2.
Well, gold images or having a standard secure system config. So, everything gets installed the same way. You don't have somebody loading Linux boxes with their own version of Linux. You want to simplify the number of operating systems in your environment to reduce the complexity of your environment. Or when you run Windows, you make sure that the configuration is the same across all of them using either GPOs or certain software loads on there. So if you load a Windows box, it's going to have AV, certain IDS, or HIPS or something.
Yeah, don't let people install Telnet, Netcat, things like that on their systems without knowing about it. And number 1 is application whitelisting. So basically know all the applications that are in your environment. That way, again, you have no rogue applications. Kind of goes along with number 2, standard system configurations.
Yeah, and that can be done with a policy. Like you could say, okay, you're authorized to have these applications. If you want to put FileZilla on there, it's not necessarily on the list of approved applications. You might have to talk to your manager or talk to the security manager to find out a need for use if it's necessary, that kind of thing.
Sure. So try to get that policy in place where if anybody does want to install a new application, they come to the security team can test it out, make sure they actually need it, or if there's a, something different that you offer as an enterprise or as a company, you have something that's similar to it and does the same thing. Maybe that's better.
Yeah.
And then you can go test it out, make sure it's not full of malware and things before you go and hand it off. And then you can do, you can take a hash of the executable when they install it, or have it in a repository for them to download from, say, your SharePoint server or wherever, or your file server. They download it from there, not from the internet, because that's a known good.
Yeah, that's good in theory until your IT department quits updating those, and then you end up with a software repository with Firefox 3 on there, and somebody downloads Firefox 3 and installs it thinking it's known good. I don't know of any place in particular that might occur, or can occur. But
you're such a complainer.
Such a complainer. So yeah, you could either, or you can invest in technology like, something that will automatically monitor for new software.
Okay, so those are the 5 quick wins that they recommend. Let's count down. Let's go to number 20.
Yeah, the more we thought about this, we were trying to decide whether or not we should start with number 1 or go to number 20, because when we did the OWASP, we did 10 to 5 and then 5 to 1, but it was interesting. Number 20 was penetration tests and red team exercises as being the least, was it least effective or the least useful?
Well, I think it would be one of the last ones you need to look at seriously, because if you don't implement the first 19, you won't get as much value out of number 20, and I think that's where they were going with there.
Yeah, that's what Jared said when he was on our podcast. That's one of the things, because he mentioned that he's gone into engagements before where he's started the pen test and then found out, okay, they're not ready for a pen test because they don't know their environment. They don't know where the data is. He'll often go back and do the other 19 items with them before he actually starts the pen test.
Or he'll recommend a
Yeah.
lot of the things in the 19, and he'll say, you guys really need to get serious on this other thing, because I could totally own you, and you need to get this going. So yeah, so pen test. Very important to test everything you've implemented. You might be a complete failure, but you wouldn't know that unless you've tested, right? That's why pen testing is important. Once you've implemented
Exactly.
something, you always got to test what you've implemented to make sure you did it right.
Yep. Yeah, and if you're wanting somebody to come in and do a pen test, it can't be. I don't know if you want it to be adversarial or not. I mean, adversarial with regards to.
You didn't just say that.
No, no, you. Oh, okay. All right, all right. Hang on. So you don't want it to be adversarial in the point where you're actually trying to stymie the efforts of the pen tester to begin with. You want to be as open as you can be. You want to be able to say, okay, we know where some of our pitfalls are. So he doesn't find them and waste his time. If you know that there's something wrong in the network, we know for a fact that this is broken. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and concentrate on something else.
Well, so I see what you're saying. You basically want to not give them a black box test, right?
No, black box does not help anybody because you have a limited amount of time.
Yeah. With a black box, you're saying, I mean, when you hire a pen tester, it's not a good idea to say, okay, I'm company X, attack me now, without telling them anything else, because you're wasting their time and your money. Help them with their reconnaissance and their mapping. Okay, tell them where the data is that is most valued in your company. They're there to help you and to help you make yourself more secure. Don't hinder their progress by requiring a black box test, quote, like the real hackers would, because real hackers have plenty of time. They've got unlimited amount of time, some would say. Whereas if you hire a pen tester, they've only got 40 hours or 80 hours, and then they're done. They're moving on to the next job.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would go as far as giving them as much information as you would an auditor. I would give them network diagrams. I would give them super user password, or if your web application had an authorization function, I would give them something to allow them to get into the box and interact post authentication. Because once somebody had an account, a bad guy, and he got into your network, if there's something bad on the inside of your web application, they need to be able to test that as well.
One thing you should probably do is tell the pen tester the location of your most sensitive data. Just tell them it's right there. That's my most valued digital asset of the whole company.
Wouldn't that be on the network diagrams? Like, hey, see this server? That's where our good stuff
Sure.
is.
I mean, that's part of telling them where the stuff is. That way they know what to strive for. Let them go after that, the holy grail. Use every trick you can think of, that kind of thing. You don't want to hide anything from them. That way you get more value out of the pen test.
Yeah. And, it's okay for them to tell you your baby is ugly and that you need to fix it. And, more than once, I know that my friend Bob has told pen testers where weaknesses in systems are so that the pen tester would attack those systems, because Bob was trying to get some change done necessarily that management wasn't exactly listening to him about. It seems like sometimes Bob would use pen testers as agents of change.
Yeah, that's true. And I think we've heard that or we've mentioned that on our cast before, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I don't know. Well, to sum it up, I guess it's good to have a new set of eyes on your business, kind of with a malicious point of view, right? Getting a smart and devious mind who does this sort of thing day in and day out to look at your systems, it can't hurt.
Well, yeah, and if you're not used to thinking like that, often bringing in a pen tester will kind of jumpstart that idea for you, because they'll be like, okay, here's how we went and did something. And then you'll be like, oh, yeah, okay, so in the future, I may want to think about that kind of stuff too. And maybe your management would also think along those lines if they started, kind of a poor man's threat model, if you will.
Yeah. And they also, it's really cool that after the pen test, they can come in and talk to, like if they busted your core application, they can come in and talk to developers and say, hey, here's how I did it. You guys might want to code a little differently. I know some some pen testers that actually do code audits, right? So they'll actually look at your code and see if they can find any ways to break in from, looking at it on the inside. So, and almost always they'll find something that you either weren't aware of or that you thought might be exploitable, but you just couldn't prove it and draw enough attention to it, like you said.
Yeah. And like when you're writing a paper or you're writing something, you're looking at it all the time. So you get kind of eye blind to things. So having that fresh set of eyes, he'll be like, well, you're not doing this. And you'll be like, oh yeah.
Sure.
And so you'll get that kind of thing where it's like, okay, you got to stop and kind of look at every word instead of just seeing sentences or seeing the forest instead of the trees. So
yeah. And what you mentioned about giving them accounts, or I think you may have meant give them a few customer user accounts so they can actually be one of the, for example, if you're dealing with credit cards, maybe you'll give the pen testers some cardholder accounts. If you have an online shopping thing, you'll give them some customer accounts that they can use as dummy accounts or whatever, and then they can go, pick items and buy them, and then you'll know, oh, okay, well, we don't really want to actually order or ship things to this account because it's a fake account, that kind of thing. And then they'll interact as a customer and see if they can find logic flaws or whatever other kind of cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, things that we talked about in our OWASP cast, if you want to listen to that one.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you got me. So maybe having different roles. So if you know that a super user account can do X, you might want them to look at and find out what other things that user might be able to access once you did post auth on a web app.
Most pen testers that I know probably will get that admin account anyway. They'll find something like a default account of some obscure application that was installed in your network somewhere. Some sort of a backdoor that's known but you didn't know it. They do this, like I said, all the time, and they're going to know those quick wins, or they'll use social engineering to gain an admin account, that kind of thing.
All right, so on the heels of doing the pen test being the least useful, another one they mentioned was secure network engineering, and basically this is just setting up your network properly, where you've got public, DMZ, and private. Basically, making sure your DMZ has certain services in it that aren't in your public or in your private. Doing the tier architecture, you're going to have firewalls between all of them. You're going to have isolation of networks. Your ACLs, you need to make sure your ACLs are allowing least possible access, but still maintaining maximum functionality. Or if you're using cloud-based stuff, like Amazon, they have security groups instead of ACLs, and you can set those per machine or per network.
Yeah. So you mentioned the architecture of the network. I think one of the quick wins on there was to architect a 3-tier environment. I really don't think that's a quick win. I kind of disagree, because it would be pretty difficult to re-architect your network if you didn't have a 3-tier architecture to begin with. They mentioned having the top layer be a DMZ, which has access to the internet but never contains sensitive data. And then the second layer would be your middleware, something that talks in between the DMZ and the third tier, which is your private network, where you put your data. So you never want tier 3 to talk to tier 1 and so on.
Yeah. And anything in your innermost, I don't know how people visualize these, if it's like strata, like bedrock strata, where you've got one layer upon one layer upon one layer, or if it's like a concentric donut where you've got your private stuff in the very center, and it's got like layers of firewalls or layers of infrastructure,
sure,
between those. Or if it's more bubble based, where you've got connections going from your private or whatever. Have never been a real big fan of the three-tiered model. I think there should just be public and private. And, there's technologies out there that will allow you to have, I guess you could even have inside your private, you could have like segmented private domains, so that not everything in the private network should even be able to access one another.
I think with your head in the cloud, since you're working for a cloud company now,
I can
your
confirm. I
your
can't
network
confirm or deny that.
your network architecture is kind of skewed into that cloud world. But yeah, I like the three-tier model. I mean, you have your web server, your application server, and your database server. It kind of goes along with that, right?
So wait, where would your application server be?
In the middleware piece.
You put your application server in the DMZ?
It doesn't have any sensitive data. It's in the middleware area. Your web server's in the DMZ, your application server's in the middleware. It doesn't have any data on the application server. All your data is on the third tier, which is the databases. So it kind of falls in line with that as well. In some firms that I've worked for, they have that model if they have stuff on the web.
How would you allow for connections? Would all the private stuff, because I know you and I have both dealt with PCI, where it's kind of like a black hole. Anything that goes inside of PCI's enclave has to stay inside of there, and any connections that originate from the PCI have to go out. They can't come back in, so they're one way. So
yeah, you got to scrutinize any connections going into the environment, which is what you're doing with the DMZ. You have a DMZ, only certain connections can go in there, but then the only thing that can talk into the middleware area are those DMZ servers. And the only thing that can talk to your third tier, your private network, are the middleware servers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your middleware shouldn't be allowed to go inside your private domain, right? All the connections should be one way coming out of the private network.
It does have to talk in to be able to, store data and retrieve data, right? But that's the only thing that should be going in there from the middleware.
But it should be very granular if you're going to allow stuff going into your private area.
Sure, and we talked about in our ADHD cast where you would set up honeypots in your middleware network as well. Fill up if you have a /24, fill it up with honeypots, and anybody that starts scanning in there, let's say they infiltrate it from the DMZ, they'll be caught at that point.
Yeah.
So, on your network's devices, make sure you use, configuration best practices. A lot of companies will start out going that way. They'll say, well, I want to whitelist everything. I just want to put things that I want to access into my network. So they'll have rules that say, X can talk to A, Y can talk to B, and that's it. And then they start going, well, except for these. So they'll put in deny rules. So they have allow rules, and then they have some deny rules. And that's when it starts getting cloudy, because then you start getting it all muddled. You'll have allow rules, then underneath that you'll have deny rules, and then underneath those you'll say, oh, well, I really don't want to deny all that. I want these other. So that you'll have allow rules inside the deny rules, which are inside the original allow rules, and it gets all jumbled. So make sure that you continue to use best practices, and you do firewall ACL audits regularly.
Next generation firewalls, now they do it by per application or by per user. So then you have to start looking at, does this application open too much functionality, or does this user have too much functionality? And maybe you should audit, based upon, why does Bob need to have access to all of these things, or why does he have access to go out to the internet at all? And why are my employees allowed to use Facebook or or Google Drive? Why does Bob have access to Google Drive, to exfil all the data, and all the things?
Yeah.
So,
And then I think physical and logical diagrams are very important as well. It gives
oh
you
yeah,
kind of a bird's eye view of how your network is laid out. And then, of course, if you have new employees come in, they look at the diagram. Auditors can look at the diagram and quickly assess. Pen testers, give the pen tester your network diagram,
exactly,
and they can get a
exactly.
quick overview of what's going on. They know how to go where and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And you need a central control for your configurations also. That way you
Like
can,
document management system.
um, yeah, in a sense, your central control system for your network devices can manage all of the configurations um,
Mm-hmm.
centrally, and it'll also monitor them to see what changes are going on, and then it'll contain a history of what changed when.
Cool. All right.
And
So
so that's secure network engineering. That's security control number 19, and you can see our Paul Coggin cast if you want more. Right, we talked about a lot about trust relationships and all kinds of good stuff.
oh yeah, that dude. That listening to that one still gives me cold sweats and in odd places and stuff. Uh, yeah, that was a scary podcast to listen to right there. So make sure you're drinking heavily when you listen to that one because that would keep you up at night. With the not BGP routes was just scary enough. So number 18 was incident response and management, which I found odd because you would think, after hearing how the media has, basically latched onto every possible data breach that is out there, people would want to, incident response management would be like right at the top of the list, but they have it down at number 18, which I found kind of odd. And
Yeah. Well, I find it odd that it's number 18 and also that well, to me, this control is documenting procedures and naming names. It's all about planning. I mean, the way
yeah,
SANS, or the Council on Cybersecurity, as they're called now, defines it, it's pretty much an exercise in documentation and planning. They do suggest that you run through scenarios and make sure that your planning is effective. But I would think that by having a pen test, going back to that, would be a fantastic opportunity to test your incident response plan.
well, only if your pen tester caused the denial of service of a major system. I would imagine that would probably be the only way you would, need to be testing your DR or BC plans.
Well, yeah, testing those kind of plans, but your incident response plan, I mean, you should
Oh,
be
sure.
monitoring for things that the pen tester is going to test, or not test, but he's going to exploit. So,
True.
one idea that I had was to forward some of your incident alerts that you would get normally when you're detecting some sort of activity. Forward that to the pen tester. That way he can see that, oh, he got caught doing such and
Mm,
such, and he needs to be a little
yeah.
more stealthy. I mean, that helps you
Yeah.
out too, because then he's like, oh, these guys kind of know what they're doing, so I better go reach further in my little bag of tricks.
Yeah, but your monitoring weasels should be sending those alerts to somebody if they're noticing odd traffic
Oh yeah, they should
patterns.
be sending
You
them
know.
to the security team, but
Yeah.
forwarding them to during the pen test to the pen tester to let them know, hey, you just got caught. I think that's a good
True.
idea.
Yeah, get for the lulls or whatever. Ha, we found you, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so doing incident response, when I was a consultant at doing some consulting for hospitals, one of the things that we always asked them was, do you have a business continuity plan for systems or for a disaster recovery plan for, let's say the hospital gets hit by a tornado, like unfortunately when Joplin, Missouri got hit a couple of years ago. I'm sure I would hope that they had a DR plan or a business continuity plan. But you'd be surprised about how many hospitals don't, or industry period, who don't have a DR plan because there's always that not me thing.
Oh, I think
It's not going to
everybody
happen to me.
everybody has a DR plan, but most of the
Do
time it's
they?
usually help, help, help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where you're always training for the rainy day or for the worst possible scenario, and you mentioned it's a lot about procedures and policies and stuff, but there's also a lot of training involved too. If you're going to have an incident response plan, or you need to test your incident response and your business continuity and disaster recovery plans on a regular basis. Um, you know, uh, when doing so, you want to be able to make sure that everybody's familiar with how things work. And it reduces mistakes when you're doing those tests. So afterwards you want to have a lessons learned to make sure that you learn from the mistakes of when you did your DR plan. XYZ didn't work, so okay, we need to make sure the next time Bob and Alice know to call up the local HVAC folks and make sure that the HVAC is running in the spare closet properly, or that we're maybe you'll even notice maintenance issues like, okay, well, we found out we're not paying for our our uptime, enough uptime at our beta site, so we'll need to upgrade the data plan for that, for instance.
My accountant Swifty was working at a large multinational, and they tested their business continuity plan Friday because their power went out. Okay, and they had tested this before. They ran a sim of it. They actually had a power outage the year prior, but he still had takeaways from this power outage.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So whether or not it's a test or it's an actual thing, you need to have a lessons learned after, just to make sure that things can be tweaked, things can be improved, things can be modified, things can be phased out. So if part of your DR procedures is to make sure your AS400 gets booted back up properly and you're not using an AS400 or haven't been for the last 15 years, maybe that's something you need to get out of your SOP.
Or 20.
Yeah. So that's why I don't understand why it's number 18. I'd love to have somebody from the cybersecurity group on to discuss that, because it seems to me like that would be something at the top of the list. But
book it. Tell your secretary to make some calls and get somebody on the cast that, is an expert or one of the gurus of this, list.
Yeah, right? Maybe be able to explain their rationale behind some of the listings on these. So, of course, number 17, data protection, which again is another one of those things with all the data breaches going on and the leaked credit cards and what have you. You would think the data protection, or protecting data that is important to your company livelihood, would be at the top of the list, but it's number 17, which...
Well, I don't know. Maybe they're saying, hey, this will give you the most bang for the buck, so do number 1 first, number 2. But yeah, this is number 17. So it talks about encryption, integrity, and so forth. So I go to the NIST algorithm and validation list to see if the encryption you want to use has stood up to scrutiny. Right? That was part of this. Let's say you want to distribute BlackBerries across your organization.
What's BlackBerry?
And it has, well, it's like the AS400 that you mentioned, right? This is just a scenario, right?
Ouch,
and it has a triple DES encryption. Well, if you go to the list, you'll find that BlackBerry's triple DES implementation has been validated by NIST. So according to NIST, your BlackBerry has a correct implementation of triple DES. So that's pretty valuable.
Is it triple DES 3 key, 2 key, or 1 key? That makes an entirely huge difference.
Let me pull that up. It'll tell you there's different modes of operation. There's the TDEA electronic code book. There's the cipher block chaining. There's the cipher feedback. Yeah. So there's all those different modes of operation. And if you look on the list, you'll find different companies and different devices that actually implemented that mode of operation properly. And you want to make sure if you buy a device or you have devices that they're actually implementing your algorithm, your encryption algorithm properly. Because it would suck to get a firewall, let's say, and you're doing VPN and the encryption over there isn't to spec and it has inherent flaws.
So use NIST approved. Didn't they approve dual ECDBRG, which is the one that, people found out had backdoors in it all over the place and was not used?
Well, maybe they did, but it's better than nothing, right? It's better than wishful thinking.
Why do you love the government so much, Mr. Boettcher? Why are you a fan of the NSA? Why does your shirt say "I love the NSA" on it?
Oh, sorry, it's Wednesday.
Yeah. Oh, all right. You didn't have any. It was laundry day, and that's the
only
thing
it was laundry day.
Right.
I wore all my B-sides T-shirts, already, and they're piling up.
Yeah, so don't try to roll your own crypto. So that's important. one of the things is we talked with Marcus about, how long you have to keep the data secure. So if you only need to keep this data secure for a month, then, maybe single des encryption is going to be enough if it's going to last only a couple of weeks or something. You need to know what level you need to protect your data at. A lot of people poo-pooed on using TrueCrypt after, before it was finally canceled because supposedly it had been backdoored by a government agency. But, unless you're worried about government agencies taking your data, if your worries are only that a competitor will do that, I would say still use TrueCrypt or whatever it is that has taken it over for TrueCrypt. I use one called VeraCrypt still. It's a TrueCrypt kind of replacement. Because it's still good to use. I mean, you can use different kinds of encryption schemes with it. And if you're just trying to keep a competitor who is non-government entity or not sophisticated attacker from getting business sensitive data, that might be one way that you can actually enhance your data protection.
Yeah, and some important takeaways from this data protection encryption subheading would be that you need to encrypt data both in transit and at rest. So that basically if your data is lost, if somebody does exfil your data and it is encrypted, that it's extremely difficult for someone to decrypt.
Yeah.
Right. So, you may lose this data, but it's in an encrypted format, not an encoded format, but an encrypted format with strong encryption, so that it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of resources to be able to decrypt it and find out what, to turn it into a clear text form.
Mm-hmm. And data at rest for those of you who are, just continue hearing that buzzword from DLP folks. That's the definition is inactive data that is subject to change that is stored on a physical drive in digital form. It's inactive data which is stored physically in any digital form. So like databases, spreadsheets, archives, tapes, backups, mobile devices, those kinds of things.
So and data at rest can also be clear text data too, unfortunately. So you need to scan your systems regularly to see if you have any clear text PII, personally identifiable information.
Yep, and there's a numerous amounts of applications out there, DLP wise, data loss prevention devices that can be used to either scan your box or scan your network drives for possible clear text info.
Yep.
So, yep, and that's why it's important to do the encryption of those things, just to make sure that if somebody does do, because you can use DLP if you're a pen tester to scan a network for PII or addresses or socials or social security numbers for the United States, NSNs for other countries. Data labeling and classification is also important, because when you label your data, you can set the sensitivity of the data. In the military, we use secret, for official use only, top secret, for your eyes only, that kind of stuff. It also allows you to set the length of time in which to keep data. And as we've found out numerous times, businesses hold too much sensitive information. So you want to make sure that, you need to get into a culture of, if you don't need it, get rid of it. If you're not contractually obligated to hold on to it, which sucks sometimes. But
yeah, it does suck, and it puts you in a bind if you have to keep data forever.
Yeah, because it's an ongoing cost that has to be, every year your costs are going to mount because you've got to hold on to data that you may not necessarily need anymore.
Sometimes your salespeople make that as a selling point. We never delete your data. It's always there for you. It's just a dark place in my mind right now.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, integrity. Let's talk about integrity. How do you integritize your data?
Well, you can sign it with for an email, you sign it with your PGP key to, for identity, for non-repudiation.
Oh, yeah.
To prove that you are who you say you are. If, you're sending something to somebody, you might encrypt it with your public key, or you might encrypt it with your private key so that they can decrypt it with your public key. And since you're only supposed to have the private key, then they'll know it's coming from you. Or
who's they? The hackers?
Yeah, yeah, that would be they, wouldn't it? Yeah. So, well, because having it, if your data gets stolen, you have issues with integrity, not just from maintaining the data. You can also lose your company's integrity.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I like that.
Um,
So, sometimes, well, like maybe you do get hacked and it's all encrypted and everything, and the hacker goes, "Oh crap! Well, if I can't have it, nobody can," and they get delete. Right? That's something
yeah,
that they may be able to do. They may not be able to decrypt it, but they probably can elevate their privileges to be able to delete it. That's why it's important to have backups of your data, right?
mm-hmm.
And also take hackers out of the picture. What about just what do you call it? Just fate, right? Store your data on fault tolerant disks like
Mm-hmm.
RAID
Yep.
or something that's not, you get a hardware failure and all your data is gone and then your company goes out of business. You got to make sure that you're smart about where you house your data and how you
Yeah,
house it.
and when you're housing it, especially if it's off-site, you may want to do hashing before you send it to them to make sure that it's not modified in flight.
Ooh, hashing.
So you hash prior to, and then you can hash it on the other side to make sure that you had basically a true image of all your information. Make sure your backups are not modified or added to or deleted from. Having a real hashing mechanism there to allow for that is good. I think we talked about DLP. I don't think we need to talk about that too much.
Well, that's such a huge topic. I mean, we could do a whole
Again,
cast on DLP. Yeah.
yeah, and probably we will at some point. But yeah,
So
um,
yeah, just to sum it up, you monitor your data egress. You can, detect when a large amount of data is leaving your network. There's tools to do that, and then you can, if you don't catch or prevent people, breaking into your network, you may be able to catch them when they're trying to exfil data out.
mm-hmm, yeah, yeah, that's always important. You can put that on your email to scan your emails going out. So if and that's a policy thing too. You want to make sure that people know they're not supposed to send credit card information over email because if they get hit with their DLP solution, you can get in trouble.
Yeah, and you can test data exfil as well. Again, your pen tester might be exfilling data. I think, yeah, I
Didn't Bob
remember a
doesn't
time when somebody was telling me that his friend hired a pen tester and they were able to exfil a bunch of data. I remember
I
that.
yeah, I think I do remember that as well.
It was
That
like a
was a
story in some group meeting
magazine or something.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
a magazine. There you go.
yeah, yeah. So okay, so we got to the bottom here, and it's going to be a long podcast. Sorry, y'all, but that's just the way it
Is that
is.
my fault?
So
Sorry.
no, no, it's just we're passionate about this, and we want to make sure that we get these covered
Hey,
properly.
this is
So
good stuff, man.
yeah, you know what? Account monitoring and control. I remember a certain
So
auditor.
you're on number 16.
Yeah, number 16. I'm sorry, number 16 is account monitoring and control. I seem to remember an auditor or a person that Bob used to work with who
And some other third
had,
guy.
oh God, yeah, his name is Clark. We'll call him Clark. And he had to, that was his bag. He spent hours and hours making sure that accounts were monitored and controlled. And
How did he do that?
I don't know. I think he put it in a spreadsheet or something, several hundred users, to make
Pages?
sure
Yeah.
pages. Yeah, it got awful, but yeah, just to make sure that accounts, and that's kind of one of the big things for PCI. I know is making sure that accounts are disabled, removed, people are removed from the system in a proper amount of time.
Yeah. So account management, what you're looking for is disabled accounts. You're looking for locked accounts. You're looking for accounts with expired passwords. You're looking at accounts with passwords that never expire. You're looking for all those things, and you need to integrate them into a, if you're using a spreadsheet, just grab all that data from somewhere, whatever tool you're using, LDAP, what Active Directory, whatever you're using.
VPN, you don't want somebody who's been let go from the company 6 months ago to still have a VPN account.
Yeah, or
that'd be bad.
Or
that'd be bad.
Don't want ex developers knowing passwords that never change, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then another thing you can do is monitor account usage. So if Jimmy logs on to systems X, Y, and Z every day, and then for 2 years, and then all of a sudden he's logging on to system F, and you're like, what's going on here? Why, at least you can detect that. So
or what's worse is Jimmy hasn't worked here in 6 months, and now he's logging in because he gave his password to somebody else.
Guy. Yeah. So basically you're profiling. I know that's a bad word. It's a 4-letter word, but you're profiling your users, right? He's counting.
Yeah, that's it. It's 6. It's 6. But yeah, I get your point. Plus,
7.
If you're
profile.
Oh God. Wow. Yeah, it is 7. Oh my God. It's been a long day. Okay. It's been a long day. So yeah, account management's important. You don't want somebody logging in on the, that's how they catch people who are doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Yeah. 2-factor auth, some people say that 2-factor auth is kind of a big deal. You want to have that on things that are of a sensitive nature, whether it be VPNs or, I don't know, email. You might want to use it on an email system for OWA. If you have Outlook Web Access, you might want to use 2-factor auth on that because you don't want somebody to access emails.
Nefariously.
We've mentioned, yeah, exactly. And we've mentioned, proper storage of accounts. You don't want to use, if you're using Linux, you want to use PAM modules. You want to be able to, use a shadowed passwords. Make sure your web application is storing passwords in a hashed format instead of in plain text. Because, that doesn't happen these days in 2015, people storing passwords in plain text. But,
no, and people don't have passwords in spreadsheets either.
Nope. Or, sitting in email draft folders, or anything like that.
Yeah.
So,
we don't see that anymore.
I don't speak from experience. I just, people have told me things. So.
And I read them in magazines.
Magazines, right. Very important, those magazines. So, all right. So we wanted to start something new. So what's the takeaway you get from these 5 items?
Oh crap! I haven't thought about it. Why don't you go first, and then I'll think. There's so many takeaways. I think everything this is like a takeaway cast, right?
Takeaway cast. Yeah. Well, I think you're right in the fact that they made these security controls with this at the very bottom because they want you to do 1 through 15 before you get to 16 and 17. They want you to run or crawl before you can run. But what you see from a lot of companies is these are the exact things that they worry about the most. So, if you're dealing with compliance frameworks, I don't want to turn our podcast into Let's Bitch About PCI, but PCI requires account monitoring and control. It requires you to do DLP. It requires you to do encryption of certain types of data. It requires you to have an incident response plan and test that plan. It requires you to have proper network segmentation. It also requires you to do pen test, to do all the checkboxy things. When in fact, you don't, and that's why people harp on the PCI stuff so much, and why so many companies fail at PCI is because they're worried about these bottom 5, when in fact the other 15, which we'll get to, are what you should be working on first, because they're the building blocks for you to get to number 20.
Yeah.
In fact, number 20 should be where you'll be like, yes, we've achieved, achievement unlocked. Step 20, we can do a pen test now. And we can feel confident in knowing that we're not going to get completely owned by the pen tester.
I think you really don't have to start from number one, and then when you're done with number one, go number two. I think you can do what they label as quick wins on the document. They have like examples of what you can do for quick wins, and then some more advanced things and some intermediary things. I think you should probably scan the quick wins on all of them and see if you can get those. So those are going to be easier to implement, and you get the most bang for your buck as far as what SANS recommends. So yeah, it's not so much you have to do them in order. I think you can scatter whatever and do whichever of these controls, and there are a lot of different controls per number, right? So number one has a lot of controls in it as sub-controls. So yeah, my takeaway though, I think if I had to choose one, would be a quick win would be account management. Find a way to harvest all of the accounts in your enterprise and be able to tell, what all the accounts are that are on there that are disabled, the ones that are locked, the ones that are expired, and the ones with never expiring passwords, all your system accounts. You might also want to look
at roles as well. If Joe used to be the director of payment management or something, and now he's director of IT, maybe he doesn't need access to the payment systems like he used
or
to.
Maybe he's a manager with sysadmin level access or root access to certain file servers or something, because he's got to look at his report or whatever. God, these things just keep coming up from dark places.
I know. I just thought of the role-based stuff. Role-based access is so very important. You want to make sure that you're roles.
Accounts. Figure out a way to get your accounts all in one place, just so you can review them and look at them and keep a history of them.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. And you have to do that regularly. So you have a way to automate the process would be the best way. So you're not running around to 500 different systems to, get the sudoers file, for instance, on a box to make sure that people who are in the sudoers, file is supposed to be there. So you want to be able to find a way to automate that either with like a chef or a puppet, or, maybe if it's something as simple as a batch file that will go out and automatically log into each box and pull your, Etsy sudoers file or something like that.
Is that a wrap?
Yeah, I think you're going to find a lot of automation is going to be important for these. All 20 of these controls, if you go to SANS website, they have a list that will show you a vendor that can do some of these things. And you'll find that, some vendors have something that will address more than one of these. So you can go and look for those. We don't endorse any of the vendors on there.
Well, I think another important thing that you can do that SANS does have documented is the metrics. And I think metrics are very important when you can apply them and apply them effectively. It can show management, trending, and get more buy-in for what you're trying to implement. So I think metrics are very important. And it kind of measures how well you're doing over time.
Yep, and your metrics got to make sense.
Got to make sense, and
they got to make sense.
The documentation here in the critical controls gives you some great ideas on metrics.
Yep. All right. Well, that was it for this week. We'll come back to the SANS thing. It's not going to be something we're going to do every week. This wasn't exactly a filler podcast, but it's something that we think is important. And if they do update them, we'll definitely come back and revisit if they do make major changes to these. So, well, we've gotten a lot of good positive feedback from everybody, both on email and on our Twitter. We appreciate the feedback from everybody. Let me see. Let's see. Our Twitter handles are at Brian Brake and at Boettcher. We have a Facebook fan page at facebook.com/breakingdownsec. I like to put some articles and stuff on there from time to time about things. I put one up about how Google's dropping O-Day on people like nobody's business. They dropped 3 Windows O-Day, and then they dropped, or 2 Windows O-Day and like 3 Mac OS O-Day. It was awful. Google's just swinging their piece all over the place. So yeah,
they're big enough too, but they better watch it. There may be some retribution.
Blowback from that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What goes around comes around.
So, yep. I'd like to, give a shout out to Pamela. She sent us a big thank you for some of our videos on installing WebGoat. Appreciate her sending us some email. Let's see. Guy Frank, thank you to Frank for also the positive feedback. If you can't send us an email, we'd love an iTunes review. I don't think we have a lot on there or at all. So if we're on iTunes, if you can find us on there, Breaking Down Security, you can search for that. Let's see, what else did I want to mention, good sir? We have a LinkedIn group.
Feedback only makes us better.
That's right. And it's nice,
even if it hurts.
We'll do what you want to do. If you want us to do something, I think somebody mentioned Metasploit, so I want to do a podcast at least on Metasploit to discuss how it works and use the free version of that, because I know a lot of pen testers and bad guys use the free version. So it might be helpful for a blue teamer to know exactly how to make that useful for them. Let's see, LO, Twitter. We're on LO. You can do search for Brian or Brian. I think that's it, sir.
All right.
That was a great podcast. Hopefully next week, I think we'll have an interview. I would like to hope we do.
Who knows?
We're still, otherwise we'll have some more awesome content. So this is Brian and Brian for Breaking Down Security. Have yourselves a great week and see you soon.
Bye-bye. SANS top 20, they have pen testing as number 20.
Yes.
In other words, it's ordered, but it's the last on the list. Why is that, and why so much emphasis at these cons on red team pen testing if it's number 20 on the list?
So a couple of points on that. First, I was the original editor of the SANS Top 20 Critical Controls. Pen testing is in my heart and in my soul. And when we originally put it together...
Did it hurt you?
It hurt me, yes, that it was number 20. But you have to understand, first of all, the top 20 critical controls were written with an eye towards as much automation as possible. The first 15 are, in large part, entirely automatable. I mean, that's kind of where they are. So the first 15 is stuff that we could automate almost entirely. The remaining 5 are all important things to do. One is including user awareness, another one is pen testing, and so forth. But they weren't automatable in that you'd have to have a human that was much more involved. Mm-hmm. So that drives you out of the top 15. All right, then for the remaining 5, why is pen testing the last of the remaining 5? We didn't slavishly adhere to order in those last 5. They're all important. Mm-hmm. I was maybe trying to exercise a little humility and not put my sort of pet favorite as the first among those 5. We talked about it and it ended up kind of last. But that doesn't mean you should ignore it. It doesn't mean that it's the least important of the top 20. The idea is you don't pick and choose, but you do all of the top 20. Now, you have to start somewhere, and you, of course, start with 1, 2, and 3. I totally get that. But I wouldn't read too much into the fact that it's dead last. Part of it is an artifact of the top 15 being automatable, and part of it is the fact that I was concerned about putting my own pet thing first. So.